which looks at the synergies between procurement and sustainability. And Rob, I think you already mentioned how transformative it is to bring more people around the table, to bring procurement together with sustainability people in the team, and even broader C-suite, for example, to look at this transformation that sustainability requires. So maybe you can go a bit deeper into this value of bringing different functions within a company together to discuss the transformation.
Yeah, no, thanks. I'm not sure if I'll be able to go sort of much deeper, but than what you already laid out. But that is absolutely true. I mean, it's a bit of a mind shift, sort of shift in mindset rather, that is required here, because I think for a long time, business as usual sort of served lots of companies well. They're now responding, or they have to respond to changes that are coming quite quickly, especially the ones that are ambitious and are leading when it comes to sustainability. But then the typical way of doing things doesn't really work to drive that change through. You need your chief technology officer, because some of these changes require breakthrough technologies. Either you either develop them yourselves, or you bring them in from other places. But then the typical way of doing things, chief legal officer doesn't really work relevant here as well. Drive that change because some of the new partnerships that chief technology officer, the collaborative, because some of these changes require breakthrough technologies. Is also a new way of doing yourselves, or you will require clearly you bring them in from other places. Or there's the chief sustainability officer, but that is typical way. And of course, all these functions have teams, but that needs to make sense of an increasingly confusing, but also exciting, but absolutely confusing landscape of initiatives, acronyms, reporting mechanisms, standards. It's then there's of course the chief procurement officer that on the front lines, they are the interface of the value chain. They're the first sort of port of what's the expression? The first port of call. Well, I don't know if that expression really works here, but you get my drift. So, and I think the key shift in mindset in the company structure or culture is that rather than having all of these different positions do their own thing in their vacuums or in their silos, because of the size of the challenge, and because that requires embedding in the organization as a whole, these functions need to speak to each other and collaborate much more than ever before, and perhaps even more also with their counterparts and their peers in competitors, right? So that is just we are seeing that slowly but surely, that penny dropping, and certainly there are ones, and I like what John said about case studies. We also notice that our members love case studies. Maybe there are some case studies about companies that have done this particularly well. Maybe we can share some of those insights.
And I'm very happy to see already a new collaboration between the embedding project and the FMC is coming up. So perfect outcome of this session. So we're coming to the end of the session. I would like to thank you very much. Thank you very much, John, for leading us through the collaboration with SPP and to showing us really that we share a common approach to collaboration to create resources with procurement for procurement to avoid reinventing the wheel, literally. And we're really happy to have you again in a session later today in the World Sustainable Procurement Day, where you show a very interesting project between the Embedding Project, WWF, and AstraZeneca on water stewardship. So please join that session too. We will hear again from John. Thank you very much, Rob. I'm very much looking forward to our Procure Innovation dialogue in September this year. And I'm very looking forward to the results of this dialogue and to share that with the community. And I would like to thank the audience for sharing your insights. I really hope you enjoyed the session as much as we did, and that you used the opportunity to engage with your community. And please do not forget to share your feedback. You should see a link in the chat as well as a window on your screen. But before I let you go, I would like to quickly showcase another great collaboration that SPP is already running into the third year with Gartner. And if we could quickly see again the presentation, slide 10, that I prepared. Since 2022, we have a great collaboration with Gartner on the Sustainable Procurement Pulse Survey. So we really want every year to understand what is the state of sustainable procurement. And the 2024 survey will be launched on the 1st of April. So if you're not part yet of the SPP community, use the QR code on the left side of the screen to register and join the community. Look out for the announcement on the 1st of April and then do the survey. Share your insight into the state of sustainable procurement in your organization. In your resource library, you can also find a link to a presentation of the 2023 survey results, if you want to already dive into it and to see what came out of this survey last year. And even better, join the last session of the World Sustainable Procurement Day today at 11 p.m. CET time. And listen to Miguel Cosio from Gartner and Bertrand Conqueré, one of the co-founders of SPP, who will bring these results from the 2023 survey into a panel discussion. So we can already listen to them live on how they engage, how procurement leadership is engaging with these Pulse survey results. So that leaves me to thank you again very much, Rob, John, and you, the audience. Enjoy the rest of the World Sustainable Procurement Day 2024. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Katrien.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Neha Shah. I am president and co-founder of GEP. Very excited to be here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, AI, and specifically generative AI, and how it empowers supply chains and procurement. And of course, very near and dear to our hearts, sustainability professionals and sustainability as a whole as well. Joining me is my colleague, Rocky Malik. And Rocky, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Neha. Very good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody. Good day. Very happy to be part of this discussion. My name is Rakhi Malik. I'm a vice president at JP and around 30 years now in the industry. I'll bring in the functional perspective also along with the technology, both in AI and how it impacts procurement, and as well as, like Neha said, there's a lot of focus on sustainability and how can we get benefit through generative AI in that field too. Looking forward for the discussion.
Wonderful. So thank you, Rocky, for joining us. If you could go on to the next slide, please. We're going to talk about a lot of different areas. Of course, the current state of AI, it seems to be taking up all of the space and air in every conversation, everything that we look at, everything that we read. We're going to relate that to the future of procurement and more broadly procurement, supply chain, and of course, sustainability, and then share some very detailed use cases in how we're seeing some of these AI applications in our day-to-day functions, and how some of the sustainability and procurement professionals are utilizing generative AI to make a meaningful impact and difference, both from an efficiency perspective, but also creating really great, effective stories and effective use cases on behalf of their companies. So next slide, please. On the state of AI, I've spent the last year really focusing on generative AI, and went through a formal certification to become an AI faculty trainer and evangelist through an organization which is on a mission to really drive the understanding of generative AI, because it is truly a game-changing technology in many respects, as seismic, and people are saying this, but I will repeat because I believe that as seismic as the Industrial Revolution itself, certainly as seismic as the internet itself. And so we're going to talk about what is the current state, and as I said, what does that look like for the future for all of us? So next slide, please. Today, we as procurement professionals, more broadly supply chain professionals, sustainability professionals, we have a lot of things going on in this very rapidly changing macroeconomic world and conditions that we're living in. Of course, we're in a place where companies are very interested in conserving margin. There's increased demand in a lot of different areas, putting tremendous strain on our systems, on our price of the raw materials and raw labor sources that we have. We have rapidly changing legislation as well as disruptions. The legislation is quite significant across the board. It's related to risk. It's related to regulations around many different areas, but certainly more and more liabilities around what happens in our own supply chains and value chains. We're in an era of much more symmetric information. Our customers have a lot more information about everything that they are looking to purchase, are looking to us about our leadership or our companies on a much more available basis. It's the age of information asymmetry has come down quite significantly. But in that asymmetry and that symmetry that's occurring, there's a lot of not so real information also out there. So we're in an age where all of our companies are really working very hard to maintain and enhance customer trust in an era where it's even more difficult to do so. And then finally, extremely personalized experiences. This is personalized shopping, but certainly this expectation of high degrees of personalization in terms of everything that we want to buy, everything that we want to watch, everything that we want to do in our lives, an extreme focus on personalization. So these are some of the trends that certainly I'm sure, whether you're in the consumer products industry or financial services or the energy sector, many of these we would argue are common themes that are affecting all of our organizations in one way or the other. Next slide, please. So when we think about AI and AI first, again, today most of the focus for most companies today, and what we're talking about, and what we see when we're reading, is this focus on generative AI, these large language models, which we'll talk about momentarily, what it is and what it means for us. But what I argue, and especially as I've become very enthralled by this space, really, we're all on a race to become AI first in many respects. And what does AI first mean? In the age of generative AI, we used to be highly dependent on very technical people, technical teams to do everything for us, to code anything that we wanted digitally. And in the age of generative AI, I call it the great equalizer of the technical and non-technical people and individuals. And these large language models, which we'll talk about, should not be treated as search engines, but rather they should be treated as tremendous models that, with the right data, our proprietary data, our proprietary context, we can get the result of 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 really intelligent people that are given our data and our context. And so our ability to apply these large language models to create the kind of AI use cases, to transform our processes with an AI first mentality, and then ultimately do that across our organizations, both within our four walls and outside our four walls, is what I consider AI first. And so today, all of us, us at GEP, but all of you at your organizations, we're truly on a race. And with the incredible evolution that's happening every minute, every hour, that I'm sure many of you are reading about, it truly is a race on how we really embrace this transformative technology, and how we really embrace this idea of AI first. This slide in particular talks about how we at GP, but also many customers, are really thinking about AI and AI first opportunities and approaches. So when it comes to procurement and sustainability and supply chain, we have all used AI, the traditional or classical AI, in many respects, when we've analyzed our spend, when we've gotten personalized recommendations. We've gotten a lot of these. AI has been in our lives. The classical sort, algorithmic AI, has been in our lives for many decades and many years. Those of us who use the search engines, those of us who use spend analytics capability, very much understand that AI has been there. But now, in this focus and this generative AI revolution that we're in, we see many more opportunities to really have a digital first, almost entirely autonomous, just like we talk about autonomous driving, these autonomous capabilities as it relates to our sourcing processes, our contracting processes, all of the things that we have to do downstream in our P2P, all of the dreams we had of high touch transactions becoming truly touchless and no touch. All of those ambitions are now truly capable of reality. And similarly, for those of us who are in procurement and sustainability, we are constantly looking for those insights, those opportunities, trying to triangulate information around things like forced labor and deforestation, and many of the very interconnected web of things that happen in our supply chain, all of the risk factors, as well as really planning intelligently for our categories, whether they're obviously categories that have sustainability challenges or they're not so obvious. All of those abilities now, through this technology, through this very game-changing technology, are possible in terms of all of the AI-driven capabilities that we can now drive in terms of spend, category management, sustainability, and risk. Next slide. So what is the state of AI? I kind of referred to it in my earlier slide, but again, all of us in some respects do in our personal and professional lives have interacted with this classical AI. And classical AI has been around for a long time. I won't go into that history, but certainly those of us, again, who have used the search engines, who have used automated the analytics for large data sets like our spend data or other pieces of information. We've had this kind of exposure to classical AI for a long time, and a lot of this came from really large data sets, and really, in many respects, those data sets driving kind of this supervised learning of these AI models, and being able to train the models and train the algorithms for better and better output, essentially. So things like in our procurement world, we've been using it for a long time in areas like spend classification, supplier normalization, ability to forecast some predictive trends, making the right recommendations through your buying experience, what traditionally has been called guided buying. All of these are the things that we've already used from a classical AI perspective. But again, we're in a very revolutionary world of generative AI and these large language models. Of course, ChatGPT took the world by storm nearly 18 to 20 months ago, or almost 2 years ago. And now we have, again, tremendous opportunity at our fingertips in terms of our ability to really generate a lot of content, a lot of insights with this kind of no-shot or few-shot learning capability of these large language models. And there are many, many use cases which Rocky is going to talk about in depth when it comes to the procurement function or the sustainability function. And going forward, these large language models are powering the AI agents, the large action models, where now these large action models powered by the power of LLMs will be able to truly execute large tasks. Today, they can execute that through the form of these GPTs, but now an interconnected web of these large language model and the GPTs to create these action models to truly, again, transform our processes very differently, to be AI first with a very light touch of human intervention. And again, all of these capabilities that we thought previously were not possible are finally becoming more and more possible with every single day. Now, one thing I will also say in AI is that in this revolution, many of these large language models you have heard in terms of creating the best imagery, the best content, really amazing things that can be done. It does really well with large amounts of unstructured data. So some of the challenges are structured data, which we are also, many of these models are working through, and there's workarounds right now. But the ability to combine structured and unstructured data for the best output, as I said, the right models with the right context, with the right data, creating really remarkable output as it relates to procurement and sustainability and supply chain. Next slide. Okay, so I think in terms of what is the current state, many of you on the call probably are experimenting on your own, but certainly within the organizations. And there is a huge, of course, demand from all levels within the organization, within functional levels of the organization to the C-suites to the boards. And our ability to figure out the right use cases, the lowest hanging fruit, and implementing some of these AI bots within the course of the next few months to the next year we imagine is tremendous, and the data shows us such. We're working with customers across the board, and every single customer is the first thing that they're thinking about is how do we become AI first? What are those use cases, and how do we apply them and show the value very rapidly? Next slide. When it comes to sustainability, my personal interest is that, of course, this AI is taking a lot of the air in the room, and rightfully so, because as I said, I believe, and with my own experience and training, it is a seismic technology. There's a lot of hype, but it has truly seismic potential, and in that, it has amazing opportunities for what we're all trying to work with in the sustainability space and in our value chain. As we know, in sustainability, there's a lot of different challenges. There's challenges to the access to the right data. There's challenges as it relates to standards. There's challenges as it relates to how do we measure, how do we track, how do we report. And so one of our major kind of AI use cases and the areas that we're focused on is really kind of AI-powered, AI-driven sustainability solutions. And we think about it as in these 4 areas, setting the stage for sustainability in terms of the vision and our ability to conduct all of the materiality and gap assessments, our ability to measure, get the right data, get the right context, utilizing models and our own technology in the background. How can we now measure many of the things as it relates to the E&S in ESG and other kind of key sustainability metrics? How do we action? Once we've measured, what do we action, especially with our supply base? It's much easier within our 4 walls, but how do we action and collaborate with our supply base, our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supply base, and mobilize some real change in the value chain? And then finally, how do we report for our internal purposes, for our financial and audit report purposes, as well as all of the regulation that I've talked about earlier? How do we report in an effective way without a ton of manual effort, which I'm sure for those of you who have done it know how much manual effort there is. So this is our vision for truly an AI-powered value chain and sustainability. Next slide. What are the things that, when we think about generative AI, many times I ask the question when I conduct a workshop or training, I ask the question, how many of you utilize ChatGPT or any in your personal lives? How many of you utilize some of these generative AI models, LLMs, to search for something? And usually 80 to 90% of the room raises their hand. And the first thing that I talk about, even though from a marketing perspective, many of these LLMs and newer LLMs, some of them are even positioning themselves as kind of really high-powered search. But when we think about approaching and working with some of these LLMs and working with companies who are applying this LLM technology into their platforms, like GP, it's much less about search. Really, I try to get this idea that generative AI and LLMs are not search. They're not search engines, but in fact, they're extremely powerful models that, given the right context, given the right data, and again, your proprietary data as an organization is really worth its weight in gold or platinum or titanium or diamonds, because that is really the value now. The models are coming out every single second, every single minute, but your proprietary data and your context is what is going to power it. When you bring the model with the data and the context, you get results that are really tremendous, that are really the ability to do the work of 1, 10, 100, or 1,000 humans at your fingertips. That is what the capability is. So the world is moving towards how we think about generative AI. It really is very much bringing what used to be kind of software code. The most natural way to express ourselves, to get things done, is through natural language. So all of our ability to work and do things, rather than utilizing someone like me who doesn't know how to code, I can work with these LLMs through my natural language and get things done. The ability to create these LLM-powered agents, autonomous agents, GPTs, to perform these tasks, which before were very difficult to do without human intervention. So the entire sourcing process, negotiating, collaborating with suppliers, not only on PO metrics, but on sustainability metrics, going back and forth in an autonomous way. All of that is possible. Of course, the generation of content, we've all seen it and probably experimented in our personal lives, but now tremendous generation capabilities as it relates to policies, requests for information, requests for proposals, contracting, utilizing this zero and few shot learning, the ability that with the right model and context and data, it can generate really amazing output that requires very little human intervention. Of course, validation and summarization of text, and then understanding the context to provide really amazing insights about what to do going forward. With sustainability, one of the areas that I care about tremendously is this area of forced labor and child labor. But oftentimes, the data and what leads us to where the risk areas are, what we should be doing differently, are highly interconnected. It's geographically interconnected. It's extremely interconnected with other issues such as deforestation and others. Before, it was very difficult for even us as the smartest humans to be able to triangulate all of that information. But now we're able to take lots of different data, sources, structure, and then really kind of trying to make sense of it in a way that before would be much more difficult, much more taxing. And now we have that capability at our fingertips. Next slide. So what will change with generative AI when we think about it from a procurement perspective? Of course, many of you who are in procurement, since it's the World Sustainable Procurement Day, most of us are sustainability and or procurement professionals. And we understand these terms, that we have to start with our data all the way to our sourcing and contracting, and then of course to procure and then pay our suppliers. That's essentially what we do, and that's the process that most companies follow. And so in the future world, what we'll see is that, before we were kind of managing spend with data sources, algorithms, really with a lot of kind of this very strong sense of human intervention. And now we're going to move towards how we're managing a lot of that spend, but really managing the risk. And through these autonomous agents, be able to do so in a way we probably just couldn't before, quite frankly. And then similarly, when it comes to procure to pay, this idea of automated RPAs and things that many of you have put on top of kind of maybe older legacy systems, archaic systems. Now, the ability for these autonomous AI agents, all interconnected, to orchestrate the entire process on our behalf. So extremely, it's an extremely different change and paradigm shift that we're seeing that will happen in the age of generative AI and these LLMs and large action models. Next slide. Wonderful. So now I'm going to turn it over to Rocky to kind of build upon some of these topics. And then we will, as soon as Rocky completes, we'll go into Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you very much. So now when we kind of double click onto some of the real use cases that we are working with clients and that we see, organizations are wanting and how they can get business value out of it. So from the source to contract side, I'll just spend a little bit time on this. From the source to contract side, using large language models, where we have specialized assistance, be it from creating a contract, for example, or creating a category strategy. There is a lot of productivity we see there, and I will try to talk to you on how the persona's role itself changes over there. Because the most important thing is, in the value chain of source to pay and supply chain, we are dealing with a lot of unstructured data. be it contracting, be it data on sustainability from different sources, be it risk data or any third-party risk data. There is a lot of unstructured data. Plus, we have our structured data on spend and other things. How do we bring all of this together and apply generative AI, large language models, and get predictions ahead so that they can be proactive actions taken, and also help the end users from a P2P perspective to make it more user-friendly experience, more self-service, and that also shows a big improvement on the OpEx and the user experience. And of course, better user experience is always more adoption. Next slide, please. Next slide. So from a future of procurement, how we see, and this is not only what we see while talking to the customers, but we are actually seeing case studies where we're seeing those improvements or seeing the roles getting changed, in the last 15, 18 months, when we have gotten a lot of generative AI use cases across in the market, talking to, customers and prospects. So the role of a category manager, if you imagine, we do category management, and we used to traditionally manage the suppliers and the contracts. And today, with all this information of structured, unstructured data, imagine the category manager has a workbench where the category manager gets all the data in real time, not only the structured data of RFP, contracts, spend, category-wise, supplier data, but also the supplier risks, the supplier sustainability data, diversity data, all the indices globally, and it is all coming in one place. Fine, it is coming in one place, I get it as a dashboard. But now if you're adding the AI layer on top of it, both the classical AI layer, which is already existing, plus the generative AI layer on top of it, and being able to create a category strategy and say, category manager, these 2 points you have to go and talk to the supplier, there is a risk that we see. So the life of the category manager gets enhanced and changed to managing relationships and risk much proactively, predictability, and it helps the organization, of course, in the background on managing the sustainability goals. Because in procurement, as we all know, we are, in that profession, we are managing lots of suppliers across different category globally, across different levels, because many of the manufacturing organizations would have T1, T2, T3, T4, T5, Tnth supplier. So how do you ensure that till the last level, all the sustainability goals that they have confirm to that they will comply with, how are they taking care of it? So managing that relationship and the risk becomes very critical for the category manager. Then again, for a sourcing manager, from managing the sourcing events, the sourcing manager moves into how to manage it completely autonomous through AI agents, generative AI agents, large language model, which are fine-tuned for that process, be it the tail spend or be it some low touch spend. How can the entire interaction happen through the assistant? And the sourcing manager then gets more involved in managing the data strategy, because as we all know, AI feeds on the data. So having the right data strategy, having the right catalogs, like right suppliers, right processes, right governance, that becomes the major focus, rather than managing the process interaction and and the RFP, the comparison of the RFP, which is the better RFP, seeing the historical data, and then giving those kind of suggestions. Similarly, on the downstream for the procurement operations, like we said, there's we would say it is literally moving from automation to orchestration. So supervising the AI operation agents who are orchestrating the entire process through simple English language. This is organization purchase and not our personal purchase that we do outside on other websites. So this is organizational purchase. So the governance to the entire purchase is something of the AI agents is something that the procurement operation managers will get more involved, rather than trying to manage the process. Even the raising requests that I already spoke about, the end users getting into more self-service, not filling out a form, which normally the end user is not from procurement and does not want to fill in a lot of forms, but how can they get the best supplier who is already chosen by the category manager, by the way, who is already meeting the sustainability requirements. And what happens is the governance goes till the end user, where they are now selecting the right supplier through simple Q&As or orchestration and getting the the right channel to go and do that procurement and what they want to buy. So they really don't have to worry about the how process. They should just know what they need and the how is going to be taken care of by AI. Next slide, please. So if I now again double click on some of the real use cases that we're talking about, this is the value that we saw, when we are working with some of the clients as pilot to first introduce this use case and see actually how, what is the business value. So category management, we really seen a productivity improvement of almost 50%, where the category managers could develop, the strategy is already created autonomously, and the category manager then focuses on, like I said, on the risk and, maybe fine tuning it a little more from that particular situation and organizational perspective. Sourcing manager, again, we have seen that in this entire sourcing process, there is a efficiency with autonomous sourcing of close to almost 85%. There's an increase in efficiency. These are indicative numbers that we have worked with, a set of clients. On the negotiation process, specifically for tail spend and making it autonomous, we have seen that there's a cost reduction with the right data points and the right clue to the right levers of negotiation through AI. There is a reduction of almost 3 to 4% on the cost. On the contracting, huge reduction again, because there's so much of unstructured data, on contracting, and there are terms and conditions. Every contract is different. But with this autonomous contracting and a large language model specific to the domain contracting of what you want to do, we've seen a reduction on the entire contract cycle time by 70%, and on the contract review process, almost a 50% reduction of time. Similarly, on the help desk area also, that we have seen using the intent classification of what the end user is looking for, we have seen that there is a 90% reduction in the entire intent classification itself. Sometimes there is a to and fro because the person wants something and the request is not even understood. But with applying Gen AI, we have seen that there is a huge difference over there in understanding the intent classification. Next slide, please. So yes, so there is AI, and we are all going to implement. We are all in that journey, and there is constant evolution over there. And like Neha said, even I truly believe this is a complete revolution, like we had when the computers came in or the internet came in. And I think in 10 years was all about cloud, and now it's 2020s will be known for generative AI. When we move many decades, we will look back and say 2020s is all about generative AI. So of course, we are learning new things, we are implementing new things, but what are some of the challenges that we think we should be aware of? One is the cost implication. So when we are defining a use case, how do we ensure that it brings a business value? And there are methods to see that how do we ensure that it's giving you a proper ROI. So technology, operational, environmental, we have to see the cost implications around everything on that. You would have heard that some of these technological implementation also has a complete, ripple effect right till sustainability also. But organizations who are into this are taking complete care of that, and they are vouching that how they can take care of the entire ESG aspect also into this. The data security challenges, of course, many times client gets worried, what happens to my data? Are you using it for training the models? Are you bringing it in the internet? So these are something that we have to be very aware of. The accountability, the ethical practices, bias. As product companies, as companies who are bringing in AI, we are very responsible to ensure that it is completely ethical, unbiased, and there is complete protection of the data. And we do implement such things, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But from an organizational preparedness to even consider, these use cases, because things have just moved. It is not like going in a, like a graph like this. It just took a pivot, and we have Gen AI and things, the opportunity and the art of possible is just, it's unimaginable. Sorry. So, like Neha was saying, she is imparting training, to make us aware of more of Gen AI. Every organization has to see how their employees are getting upskilled, how the apprehensions of the employees are also taken care of, and how AI can become like a buddy and assistant to take care of them, and how they should upskill and move on to doing something more strategic. I think those kind of education and talking to upskilling the employees is very necessary. The data management practice is very important. Like I just said, that data is the core for this entire thing. And how do we govern the data? How do we have proper data strategies? What are the levers? How do we get it? That is something that we have to take care of from an organization perspective. And of course, integration with the existing technologies. Whether it is computational power or restructuring of any technology stack, we will have to invest on that and see how does ultimately you get the power of all the new things that's come with Gen AI and LLM. Next slide, please.
And one thing I wanted to add, Rocky, here, because while you were talking, we got a question about the hurdles to implementing generative AI in procurement, and I think the last slide actually addresses, in fact, many of the hurdles. Even though it was around implementing AI, I think it's also the opposite is what are the hindrances. So, for instance, when we speak with procurement organizations, oftentimes they know the power, but they're wary of things like, of course, data privacy, security, how these large language models are created. It's kind of this black box technology. So there's a lot of kind of training and empowerment that needs to happen to kind of really educate, not just, of course, procurement professionals, but really everybody about the power of the technology, the challenges with it, how to preserve privacy, confidentiality in the enterprise setting, which is a lot of what we spend our time, and I spend my time doing. So that's one challenge. Another challenge is, of course, and I think Rocky has a slide right here about data privacy, so I'll let her talk about that. But the other challenge, of course, is as I talked about before, the power is great models with your data and context, but your data, often procurement data, exists in a lot of systems all across the board. You're highly dependent on your IT and data warehouse teams. So there's a lot of, oftentimes, we're working with customers and we have amazing use cases to immediately implement in our GEP platform, because we architected it in a way to have data at the core and be able to apply these large language models very rapidly. But oftentimes the big challenge is, well, where does the data sit? Nobody can touch and feel it. Nobody knows where it is. So that's often kind of a hindrance and hurdle as well. The plethora, once people believe in the power of this technology, the plethora of use cases and what they want to do starts coming at an exponential pace. But then it's the challenges around touching and feeling the data and where it is, not being dependent on IT, which we often are, and then also how do we put all of the kind of protections, the privacy, confidentiality, all of that in place in an enterprise setting, because we're talking about enterprise grade data. Those are all of the factors that are required to work through some of these hurdles. But once there's belief, then again, we see an exponential growth and adoption in these organizations. Like, we want to do this yesterday. That happens also. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Neha. Actually, we spoke about many things over here, but and it's covered already. But right from, like Neha said, from data handling, storage, the access control, because you're now democratizing the data and it's more self-service. Whether if you're trying to do a sandbox, how do you isolate it? How do you make it more ethical? And the compliance. So we see that organizations like GP and also other organizations who are building this, be it Microsoft and other organizations, there is lot of security and privacy put, particularly now with Gen AI. For example, when we are building a use case, we completely anonymize the model. So when you're asking any question, say if I'm using a GPT model, there is no reference to what is the client, who is the supplier. There's no reference at all. So there is models again created within the organizations to ensure that it is sanitized, animalized, and also comes back. So, for example, if you're using GPT, Microsoft is signed a copyright that nothing of the corporate organization data is ever stored in internet, and they have signed the copyright where end of it, if there is anything, they are responsible. They're so sure about that data privacy. On top of it, when organizations like GP is building use case, we are putting in our next level of privacy and security to ensure that our clients are completely safe and everything is anonymized. So that's one way to manage the data. Access control and monitoring, again, who is going to get the control access to the large language models, which personnel, while you're giving it out to everybody, but then it is, you can do it, you can access, control the access through the personas. Model sandboxing and isolation, I just spoke about. Sometimes when we are testing and we are sandboxing, we have to mitigate any potential security risk and ensure that we do it in a segregated way with some test data and not just bring it in the main system until we are very sure that all the privacy policies and measures are taken care of. And so from sandbox, then we can move it to a QC and then production. And of course, responsible and ethical consideration. We always adhere to the ethical AI principles and guidelines, implement the appropriate content filtering. That's what I was talking about. So even if I'm asking a query, it's not that the entire document has to go there and come back. You have to filter what kind of questions have to be asked to the LLM model and come back, especially, for example, if I'm using GPT and there is no reference back to anything on that content. That we have to ensure. So there's work to be done by companies like JP and others who are building on top of it for the supply chain and procurement organizations. And of course, compliance and regulatory requirements. We have to ensure that there is all the relevant data privacy regulations are, which is all stated by the regulatory boards, are all complied with, and there is units within the organization who are always governing and measuring it and reporting it. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we will, I spoke about few use cases, but double click on two specific use cases, with the interest of time. This is about how we said that how generative AI in the downstream is converting from automation to orchestration. And instead of a form-based approach to get buying a thing as an end user, how a procurement intake management entirely managed through generative AI can be given a beautiful experience to the end user. But the intent of that end user is captured with generative AI. It recognizes it. There is a lot of buying channels, dynamic buying channels. So it gives you to the right buying channel, how the automated form is generated. So you don't have to go and fill forms and your codes and other stuff. And there is a chat interface to also, if there is further query on anything that the generative AI is suggesting through the dynamic channel, you can interact with the chat box, generative AI chat, and get more reference and more questions to the process. And this is again completely integrated with the procurement process. So is there a compliance? Are you allowed to buy that service as an end user? For example, I may be an end user and I'm not allowed to buy, say, a legal service, though it is there as a channel. So it will not be then allowed. So all the integrations with the procurement process on the back end is taken care. And upfront, the views and the workflow and the process is so seamless, just like as though you're interacting and actually getting done. So this is something that we have implemented, which is automation to orchestration as we talk. And the pilot that we're doing with few clients, they're seeing tremendous value that I alluded on terms of how they are saving time in efficiency and productivity, and also the experience. The adoption of the tool is also increasing tremendously. So there is cost saving, enhanced scalability, and of course there is data driven insights, because everything is happening through the system and people are not doing like off the tool buying, because this is a good experience. So this is one use case I wanted to talk about. The other one, if you please move to the next slide, this is more on the sustainability, double clicking on that. While sustainability is something we are taking care in the entire value chain, because everywhere we are interacting with the supplier. So at every uh, every part of the value chain, that part is important. But then again, end user is getting exposed to a supplier who is already taking care of that. That is the important part. But now, from a sustainability part, how do we ensure that we are even monitoring, measuring, and managing and reporting that properly in the entire value chain? So here we have a product in GP called GP Green. It's a platform, and as Neha said, just alluded that we created this data platform to feed into AI, which is completely low code AI enabled. It can bring in structured, unstructured data, plug in with any external system and bring in the data in any form through any system, and then apply AI on top of it and be able to do the reporting. So that powers GP Green, which is our platform. And right from managing the objective of, and this is a case study with a particular client who's an industrial manufacturer, and we have implemented this. And we've seen that right from managing the objectives that they had, the solution that we got in where the data came from multiple source system, we applied AI, and how we managed the data-driven recommendations on the category specific strategies for each supplier. This really helped the client to streamline their data management, accuracy, and emission reporting, cut down the annual update and validation time to almost 60%. The reporting efficiency to ESG frameworks also increased a lot, and the category managers gained insight for balancing sustainability with economic factors. So this is a real use case that I wanted to talk about, and especially being today. I think we are done. Can you move to the next one? Yes. Any questions?
Yes.
AI specific use case on sustainability, I think I just spoke about. Hurdles we spoke about.
Let me get off it. I can't get off it.
Hello again, and on to the next panel discussion. And in this session, we really want to get into the crux of it and understanding the importance of cross-sector collaboration, the strategies for creating shared value within the supply chain, and hopefully we can get a chance to share some of the success stories of collaborating in leading to sustainability. So without wasting any further time, I'd like to introduce the panel, starting with Elizabeth Kufabu. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, founder and CEO of North Africa Cameroon. You can wave to our delegates there. And then we've got Godfrey Ranchabeleng, Head of Supply Chain, Botswana Agricultural Marketing Board. And then we've got Tsipora Nasbom, hope that pronunciation was perfect, founder for Fix the Chain in Ghana. And then we also have Aran Kamu Renguma, Remu. I hope that pronunciation went well. Strategic Sourcing and Logistics Manager, Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. And then we also have Mary Ann Karanja, Head of Supply Chain, Africom in Kenya. So that's our panelists. I'll give them a chance just to briefly tell us something interesting about themselves and introduce them, and then we'll go in straight into our topic for the day. Starting with you, Tsipora.
I believe we missed Hepsi though.
We missed?
Am I not correct? I believe we missed. Am I?
Yeah, can you please? Yeah, you can go. Yeah.
No, we missed somebody in the introduction.
We missed Hepsi in the introduction.
Yes.
Oh, apologies. Hepsi Mukonga as well joining us. Apologies for that.
I'm sorry. So I should give a quick.
Tsipora, you can. Yeah, please.
A quick introduction of Fix the Chain and one sentence of who we are.
Something interesting, yeah, please.
Something interesting. I mean, I think that using mushrooms as a way to get out of extreme poverty is pretty interesting. Many people don't know that you can do that. That just from something as simple as that, you can make some really big change in the world.
Thank you. Elizabeth, over to you.
Something interesting, I believe what we wear is our vibe, and we can use fashion to change to improve our economy and make our lives better.
Thank you. Aran, over to you.
Thank you so much. Something interesting that I would want to share with colleagues, just for programming professionals, to claim seats in the boardroom. I think that is something that is very special for the procurement professionals.
And then Godfrey, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
hello, everybody. Something interesting. I've never really been asked that question before, but I think I actually look taller than I am in real life. I think that's probably one thing that is interesting about me. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then Hepsi, over to you.
Morning, everyone. Something interesting about, suppose me or my company. Prior to COVID, I didn't know anything about cloud technology. And now we are deep into cloud technology as a business. That's interesting.
Yeah, we've definitely moved forward with the changes. COVID. So, jumping straight in, and I'm going to pick on you, Tsipora. I just want you to lead us and just give us in your books, what is a sustainable supply chain?
I'm so glad you asked. I think that a sustainable supply chain comes down to recognizing that it's not only about the items, it's not only about the sourcing, it's about the people as well. So you're telling a full story, meaning sustainability is the who, the what, the where, the how, all wrapped together into one very holistic package of transparency and respect. When you've got that, whatever business you're in, I think then you're off to a really strong start towards sustainability. And I'm kind of intentionally being a bit vague because there are people here from all aspects of the supply chain, from all types of sourcings, all types of, it doesn't really matter. Because if you respect the people at the source, if you respect the resources that are required to do what you have to do, then you're probably going to be sustainable. So I would say that the holistic, person-centered, respectful approach would be my most succinct way of describing a sustainable supply chain.
Quite interesting. And then, Elizabeth, just from your views, what strategies do you think organizations can employ to create that shared value in their supply chains?
Thank you. Thank you, Tato. I think a successful business is one that, exists in a thriving community. So I believe that strategies that organizations can employ to create shared value in their supply chains is collaboration, partnerships with their local, communities. As we say, to create shared value is that everybody moves along at the same time, because traditionally it has been businesses making profit at the expense of the communities where they operate in. But right now, that has changed, and for a business to be successful, its community or the communities or its value chain must be as successful as it is. And also, changing the social aspect of it and making it, calling it value, I think it puts, the focus on the matter. And the strategies that can be employed, I see them as, number one, as partnerships. Organizations need to really increase their partnerships with local communities. I, for example, I'm a business and I'm an entrepreneur. I deal in African fabric and stuff. It's very important for me to build very strong partnerships with local artisans and cooperatives, because that collaboration is important. I don't want to restart the wheel. Somebody has already done it. There are organizations out there, non-governmental organizations working with artisans, trying to develop them. I come in now to give them a gateway to the market. And that collaboration and partnership is really important. And also, as businesses, I think we should engage, non-profit organizations. They're doing loads of work, on the field, working for donor organizations like the governments, the UN, and whatever. So there's a lot of work that's been done, and I think businesses should tap into that. Businesses should collaborate and work with the non-governmental organizations, so we don't reinvent the wheel. Because what I notice is that when I started out, I wanted to go create my own NGO and, to start a community of women to start working. Meanwhile, somebody else has already done that. So it's really to tap into those resources and work. And also educate. Organizations have to have strong educational programs and workshops, to teach the communities, number one, internal, for them to change, educate themselves on how they can have sustainable supply chains, and also to implement the shared value. They really need to change, their business model and how they view things. And sustainability should be a key thing, to the leadership. It should be in the DNA of the business. It's a make or break. If there's no sustainability, it doesn't work. I do that. I deal in African print. Traditionally, African print is printed by wax printing. It entails a lot of chemicals because they dye each color at one go, and the process, it's chemical intensive. So now I opt for digital printing. Less carbon footprint, but it's more eco-friendly than the traditional one. But my clients, the market doesn't understand that. They prefer the wax printing because the ink penetration is deep and intense, and that's what they prefer. But we need to educate people that this is a safer option. We're preserving tomorrow today if we choose those options. And I also feel that collaboration within the industry, people should collaborate. That's a very strong strategy, because everybody's doing their own thing in their own corner. But if people group together, pool together, I'm exporting goods to the north, you're also exporting goods to the north. So rather than me putting a truck, we could collaborate and share, and have a sustainable, means of working. And also to implement standards, standards by which people work, standards by which the industry stands, and, so that we hold people accountable. So we actually walk the talk on sustainability. So those are some strategies that I think that if businesses really look into it and put them into practice, then we can actually have successful businesses and thriving communities.
And I'm interested to understand what are the biggest opportunities that exist but remain untapped in supply chain collaboration, but specifically I'm speaking to the public sector working with the private sector, and where the support is actually lacking and what can be done there.
I feel that in the public sector, because even in the private sector, I have recognized one huge gap, which I think the public sector could fill. The public sector as well, speaking as a business, and also I think to enhance, or rather for good collaboration, I think that the public sector really needs to work to know what is happening on the ground. That's the first thing. They need to know what's happening on the ground. That means there has to be a coordinated effort. Because if I look, like in my home country, Cameroon, you have ministries that work with different people, development and whatever on the field, women and whatever. They have activities and they run their own show fine. But now when it comes to public sector procurement and everything, is when we launch out these bids, the criteria we set on the bids, we do not integrate that there are organizations, maybe grassroots organizations, that can provide the services that we need. We're only looking for a certain type of vendor, we're looking for a certain type of vendor, who are public contractors and whatever. But meanwhile, you have organizations that have been trained, they have the ability and the oh no, it's coming in French, maybe with a little bit of assistance and support, but they can also do it. So I feel that there should be a board in every country. We should have an organization that has a big overview of what is happening on the field, what non-profit organizations are doing in terms of programs and whatever, and training, and to know what skills and aptitudes are out there, and that the public sector should also, to integrate sustainability, rethink how they issue out their bid packages. They should be more inclusive. And that they don't, they don't target only a particular kind of vendor, that they should be more inclusive and integrate people at grassroots and in the communities so that everybody has an opportunity at growth. Because that's the thing, very few people have exposure to opportunities to grow and to even showcase the skills that they have. So this is not only, I'm glad you brought this up, it's not only an issue in the private sector of trying to do this because everybody's societal responsibility, shared value. It's more enhanced and talked about in the private sector, but the public sector has a lot of work to do, and I think it will even carry more weight than with the private sector.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I just want to bring Godfrey in there. And Godfrey, in your view, how do we then advance borderless supply chains in Africa to foster this collaboration and sustainable African supply chains?
Okay. Thank you very much, Tato, and thanks a lot, Elizabeth. For me, I think we should first start with legislation. I mean, let's take, for example, South Africa does a lot of business with Zambia. South Africa does a lot of business with the likes of DRC. And these are the countries that are on the opposite sides. So they have to cross through Botswana to do business. But what I've noticed is that the legislature or the tariffs at the borders, the bureaucracies, the boxes that need to be ticked in order to get a bag of orange from one country to the other is way too much. I think that's where we need to start. We need to start, lessening the restrictions of importations and transferring goods from one country to the other. I'll tell you, for example, right now, to get anything from Zambia to Botswana, it takes 2 to 3 days, a truck waiting there. And truck waiting there costs a lot of money. The same thing with Zimbabwe. We do a lot of business with Zimbabwe. To take anything across is just one lot of work. So for me, that's the first thing. And secondly, we also have to look into infrastructure. Like I already said, Botswana, South Africa does a lot of business with Zambia, and we see Zambian trucks crossing the country every day. But imagine if we had railway that goes in, from South Africa to Zambia, across Botswana, or South Africa to DRC, across Botswana, and Namibia as well. So these are two things for me that stand out, that I think, they can, speed up this borderless supply chain. They can, optimize the way we do business with one another inter-country. So for me, that's a good start. Thanks a lot.
Ask from your perspective, when collaboration can it be a liability rather than an asset? And what do you see in your experience?
I believe the answer is yes and no. I believe that collaboration is always going to be the key to our joint success. With that said, when we look at sustainability and when we look at an impact, if we're focusing on the impact, very much like what Elizabeth was saying, and I agree so strongly with everything Elizabeth mentioned, which is that at the end of the day, we're looking at this from how to reach the grassroots, how to give opportunities to people. If we are collaborating in such a way that we're taking those opportunities away from others, in the sense that, for example, you can have someone who's coming in and saying, no strings attached, here's an opportunity, you do this and then I'll offload it for you. Let's, I know if from in my field where we empower women in the field of agriculture, specifically we work with mushrooms, a business that would come in and say, we'll cover all the costs, we'll cover all your training, here's the farm, you don't even have to buy the farm. At the end of the day, you haven't empowered anybody. And there is this possibility for excessively overstepping that desire to collaborate and never offering the independence that is required to make real change, and never offering the opportunities. And everybody has a role to play, exactly like Elizabeth was saying. The grassroots have to do what the grassroots do, and the government has to do what the government does, and no one should ever be trying to play the other person's role. So there's the liability comes from overstepping your boundaries, and the solution is the flip side of that same thing, where everyone knows what they have to offer, what they're strongest at, and what they're weakest at, and what someone else should be stepping in and playing their role. And so I think much to continue exactly off of where Elizabeth started, that give and take with everyone leveraging their own advantage and respecting everyone else's advantage is where we really see collaboration at its absolute best.
Hepsi, you deal a lot more with big corporate, specifically around the linkage of small business into their supply chain. What do you think, possibly if you can comment on Zipporah and Elizabeth, where they're saying each needs to keep their lane, so what are the strategies that big organizations should be doing and what should they not be doing, and how then can they also still meet their commercial objectives while working with small business?
Okay, thank you for that, Debbie. So in the last 21 years, I've been involved in designing and developing programs to integrate small businesses into supply chain. And moved forward in 2020, I recognize a gap in the market. And the gap is that within a corporate itself, there are very siloed approaches towards developing small businesses. And digging deeper to that problem, I realized that it has everything to do with the lack of technology being utilized to coordinate, collaborate, and support each division to drive the same mandate. So you find that in any corporate, there are about 4 stakeholders that are involved in supporting small businesses, and their mandate is to integrate them. You find that there's corporate affairs, and the corporate affairs mandate is to develop a pipeline so that stakeholders in, near, and around an operation are considered when there are opportunities. So their job is to really go and find out from their communities that they operate, how can we uplift you by ensuring that aspects of procurement are headed towards those communities. Of course, you're not going to find communities who are ready to execute because they have limitations. And those limitations mean that someone has the fund to develop them. And therefore, corporate affairs has a budget to do so. So their role is to then create the pipeline so that the corporate can always have a pipeline to leverage when they need suppliers. Then you have supply chain, also a very opposing mandate on their side, and priorities are not the same. Their priority is to get quality suppliers. And we're talking about a community that might not have that quality supplier purely because they just don't have those resources. So you look at what they are required to do from a KPI perspective. The KPIs say that bring us quality suppliers that you can easily embed into our supply chain. So that means that a lot of people are left out in that scenario, right? Then you have your foundations, and foundations are given funds to unlock opportunities for the communities. But those funds tend to not speak to the pipeline that's being created for the same organization, so there's a sustainability in driving, in building supply chains. Then you have finance, or sorry, sustainability teams that want to report on what has been done. And everyone is just driving this from a siloed perspective. So how then do you coordinate and have one single view as a corporate or government entity when you're working in silos? So my view is that technology is really at the crux of that. So that's what I set out to solve with technology, to have a system that has workflows that can identify a problem from a perspective, but work towards a common goal as an organization. Then that then you can have a sense of what are we doing organization-wide? Where should we be spending our funding? Whom should we be developing? Because you have SMMEs in the background asking for opportunities, closing your operations because they feel that they're not heard. And then you have the data, but it's haphazard. So you can't even communicate a cohesive story about what it is that you're doing. So I think that is basically the approach that we took around having observed some of the challenges that are faced within a corporate itself.
I think if you as a supply chain or procurement head are not really trying to integrate AI and technology into your sourcing process and then linking to these databases and these pipelines, you're 100%.
Thanks, Hepsi, for that. I just want to bring Aran in here, and I quickly want to talk about supply chain resilience and looking back some of the challenges that we experienced with COVID and how that disrupted the entire continent or the entire globe. Now that we are post-COVID, what are the effects on the supply chain in Africa, but also maybe the strategies that can be used to build that supply chain resilience in African supply chains?
Thank you, Tato. After COVID, we experienced a material scarcity, which was mainly attributed to the reason why most of the companies, because they were not producing their goods or services locally. We realized that some of the companies that were not producing essential goods or essential services, most of them they've closed during the COVID era. So that's why most of the supply chains are now facing material scarcity around the globe. That's the effect number one. We are also experiencing increase in freight charges. I'm sure you can also agree, colleagues, that due to the scarcity of commodities on the market, it also prompted the price hike of freight charges. The statistics around the globe, it revealed that by the freight charges have gone up by 240%. So it's some of the effects that we also encountered as a result of the COVID era. You also realize that after the COVID era, we also realized the effect of port congestion. Goods are not being cleared on time on the port of clearing. I'm sure Godfrey also touched on that. This is an effect. This effect is also affecting supply chain, particularly those who are in the manufacturing sector. At times, they lose the production time. You will be having employees that will come to work to do production, but at times you would not have the raw materials because of the port congestion at the border posts. And the statistics also revealed that the port congestion, it has also gone up by 25% if you are to check the statistics. Maybe just to go on to the strategies that companies can also use or can also adopt to ensure that they create a supply chain resilience. First and foremost, they need to develop a strong corporate culture. By developing a strong corporate culture, management will be able to solve some of the problems that they encounter because they will be aware of their problems. I can give you an example of Apple. Is a very good example where the owners or the shareholders are enjoying the benefits because they've developed a strong corporate culture. You can also employ the Six Sigma supply chain matrix, which is aimed at improving the process efficiency. The advantage of the Six Sigma supply chain is that it allows identification of problems, and it also stops the problems from happening. So that's another strategy that can also be adopted by supply chain functions. We can also apply or employ the just-in-time approach, particularly for the companies that are in the motor industry. I think you also agree with me that those who are in the motor industry, there is no need at times to order many spares and keep them in stock, because it's a cost to the organization. So supply chain professionals should be proactive and ensure that they apply appropriate strategies that solve their own problems. Because some of these problems, they need tailor-made solutions.
Into the conversation. And just to add on what Aranyo just said, Godfrey, how can we prepare for similar pandemics in the future and ensure that supply chains are not interrupted in the manner that we've seen?
Thank you very much, Tato. Aran, thank you very much for touching on that. I mean, we can all agree how exposed we were, when COVID-19 came. I think most of us were not prepared. It came and we tried to do what we can in the limited time and we failed. I mean, if you look at the statistics, I think about 80% of all the vaccines in Africa are actually imported from Europe and Asia. So for me, I think perhaps this is the time now, to look internally and try to invest internally in the research and development, and of course another issue is academia. I mean, all my 20 years in supply chain, at only one point in time that I've seen a specific module that talks about humanitarian and disaster supply chains, and that was run by a university in Kenya. I think back in the bottom of Africa, I think because not many things happen, we kind of forget that something will happen eventually someday. So we relax, and then when it happens, we panic. When you talk, I mean, Aran spoke about the just-in-time supply chain as well. Each country locally has something that is good at. So instead of every country producing everything. We can collaborate. We can make cargoes in Botswana, and then Namibia can make car hooves, and then somebody else can make car wheels. So we don't have to make everything internally. I think that's why most of us fail. Another big example is in agriculture. I think Zipporah Elizabeth spoke about trying to motivate the small men. If you look at agriculture, where currently I am, we have so much land than we actually need. So we can actually partner in those areas. We can bring in the expertise and carry out research and development here in what can we plow that is sustainable. And I think looking at the weather beer and the climate change right now, we are looking at very, very long years of droughts, I think, in Africa, especially at the bottom of Africa. So I think it's the time now that, we bring in experts, from the top there to come in and invest here locally, to try and do research and developments here locally on what we can plow, and then we can share with the rest of Africa. I mean, Zambia and I think most of the countries, they export their grains, across, into Asia, and we're just next door. I think that's some of the collaborations that we need to start, talking about and seeing how best we can enhance, the friendship and the collaborations and the research and development and I think that way is a good step in trying to improve the African supply chains. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a panel discussion, so if you feel free to
Thank
jump
you. I want to take what Godfrey was saying and kind of take it one step further, because Godfrey was focusing on extremely important resilience from the perspective of COVID, from the perspective of climate change, and how we can take a system and strengthen it. And I agree, and would take it a step further and say what I think from a continental perspective, I think what we can most benefit from is strengthening the grassroots within the organization. Because, for example, what we saw in COVID and what we're seeing now with climate change is that the people who are most hit, not only do they not have a voice on the international stage to let people know that there's a problem. I mean, when you take a step back and you look at these massive disasters that are happening on a continental scale, internationally, people are entirely unaware. COVID was transparent from the world's perspective. What went on in Africa, many people aren't even aware. And the same is happening with climate change, and God only knows what'll be the next thing. And I think that if we can take supply chains, like everyone has been saying, take what Hepsi was mentioning about how we can integrate and empower from the small through these really well-positioned, massive organizations or corporates, whomever it may be. And like Elizabeth was saying, bring in the various players. And if we all kind of empower everyone to represent themselves, everyone to have a place on the global stage, then as we do the development that Godfrey's saying, as we bring the R&D in, then there'll be a bit of a leverage point. There'll be a voice to what's currently an entirely underrepresented or even a completely non-represented area or sections of the globe, sections within countries. And I think that empowering communities to have their own voice, to say, here is what we need. Maybe COVID is affecting the capital in this way, but here in our rural small community, it's affecting us entirely different. You need to know that, but they don't even know that they have the voice in the first place. And once we give them that voice, once they're empowered to speak, what do you say? How do you say it? When do you say it? And I think that empowering the continent and every aspect, every community, every individual within the continent to have their own voice is probably the best way for resilience in the future, because we don't know what the next massive disaster will be. We don't know what the needs will be. And we're going to need people from the bottom to the top to tell us what those needs are so that everyone relevant can then respond. And I think that giving voices to the underrepresented is probably the strongest path towards resilience.
Yeah. And Sipo, just to add on that, the response.
Points.
Hello,
Welcome to. Hello,
Yeah, you can add. Go.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you. I think what we also need to do is Africa, we need to localize our supply chain because I think from lessons learned from the COVID-19, most of the African countries, they were relying on European Union production value chain and China as well. And if you see the statistics, China, it accounts for almost 30% of the production around the globe. And most of the companies that failed to create supply chain resilience, they have suffered a lot. So I think going forward in future, we also need to localize our markets and equip our industries so that we can be able to produce on our own as Africa. I think that's my comment again on that.
Thank you, Aran. I just want to make sure I'm audible, or can you hear me? Okay, great. Eli, I just wanted to add on Tsipora's comment around the responsibility that actually sits with the professionals across the industry in actually pushing that message across the board, and a responsibility to actually educate. So the people that are sitting today on this platform, it is our responsibility to actually drive that message and ensure that people across the continent are actually prepared and they're informed and they have all of this information in which they can actually use to protect themselves and to better gear for whatever future we headed towards. So there's a question that's popped into the chat, which I like, and anyone's welcome to pick up on it. But how can we strategically challenge regulations to empower SMMEs and enable them to see? You're welcome to jump in.
Okay, so I don't know. I think there are various instruments already in the market to facilitate this. Whether they are implemented effectively, I think that's the question. You have in our environment the BE legislation, which has your various elements that are geared towards that. In other areas, you have your SDG 8 that is used as a leverage to support small businesses. And of course, then there's your social aspect of ESG. So I think there's actually sufficient frameworks out there. The problem is implementation. The problem is common purpose. And we're not leveraging the right instruments to drive that. You have to leverage what's going to be impactful. So you follow the money, as far as I'm concerned. You look at leveraging corporates because of vested interest in ensuring that they are profitable. So how then do you bring SMMEs as part and parcel of that so that they are also getting, even if it's the crumbs from the corporates? I think that's important because that's the biggest instrument that they have. We can't continue to develop SMMEs for the sake of developing them without giving them access to markets. And they can't get access to markets if they don't have the right skills. So if you create your own wood, then you need to make sure that you start with development. Then some of those that have the right attitude will be able to do so. So I definitely think that we don't have to go and re-engineer frameworks. We just need to implement them. But the biggest aspect of it is just reporting on it. We don't report because we don't have the right tools to report. And so we have no visibility. So I think that's really my view around that. Yeah.
Yes. May I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Hepsi, you hit the nail on the head. She's right. FC's right. The frameworks are there, but the implementation is a problem. We do not walk the talk. And I think in addition to reporting, the next step will be consolidating all this information and data. Because like I said, you also talked about the silos, people working in silos. This ministry, women and women development is working on its own, economic development is on its own, they have their own data, and but consolidate everything. There's a lot of work being done, but in silos, consolidate everything and bring it together. And we see that we're making some degree of progress. And again, SMMEs, I really feel that, policy should really change, because everything, these SMMEs, they are doomed to fail from birth. Is a stillbirth, because there is nothing there, hardly any structures in place to support and accompany them. They create people, especially women-led businesses, they create the businesses, they have to pay tax, they have no knowledge about to pay tax. Nobody accompanies them, but the taxman comes. They want to look for funding. It's difficult. Certain sectors, you go to a bank and they say no. Oh, you're in apparel, you're in fashion. No, if you're in agriculture, maybe. If you're in this, maybe. But this one, we have nothing. We cannot give funding. So how do these businesses survive? So I feel that, yes, the frameworks are there, but they need a little bit of tweaking. They have to ease it a little bit so people can actually do it, and it's easy. Maybe I think the whole problem is in the implementation, because when I look at the policies, or I read the laws, or I read the decrees that create these things, it's well documented, written and everything, but the implementation is a problem. So, and that's the big thing to chew. How do we, work on the implementation? So as EPSI said, corporate, they have a say, they have some influence, and if the SMMEs can pick up on the crumbs, and I just hope that, I was saying that I do believe that there has to be this body that consolidates all of these things for the grassroots, the small SMMEs, and documents it and reports, and that government should be a little bit, rigorous in asking for accountability and results from this organization that oversees SMMEs and their implementation and how the ease with which they have to do business. I think that's a starting point. And again, education, education. People need to be aware. People need to be aware of what it is, to create an SMA and to do it. And I believe that the non-profit sector, doing all this work and everything on capacity building, and also donors, people who sponsor, who give grants, on things, should really look at the scopes, scope first the ground, the field, find out what the real issues are, and to target the solutions, implement solutions that really solve problems, especially for creating a business. I worked for corporate for 20 years. Now I'm an entrepreneur. It's night and day. It's a nightmare. There have been many times I've wanted to drop the ball, but I just keep going. The experience I got from corporate is helping me plow on, but it's not easy. For me who has the experience, and I think about the person who has no knowledge at all. Everything is just set for us to be crooked in business, because even when you want to do things ethically, the systems in place do not facilitate that for entrepreneurs. And so I believe that procurement professionals, they hold a lot of power that they do not realize. You're working for a company, you're working for the government, and you're a procurement professional. You go out there asking for services and for goods. You play a very critical role. You play a very critical role. Yes, we want to buy a bolt, but how do you ask for that bolt from the market? Is your demand inclusive, or is it targeting just a special person? So procurement professionals have a key role to play in this, because they're the third party interface. They spend the money for the government or for corporate or organizations. So how do you spend that money? Are you inclusive? Do you ask questions that gives everybody or most people an opportunity to answer the questions? Do you tap into the skills and resources that are out there in the market? Or are you blindsided, or are you looking just a particular sector because maybe it's easy? So I feel that platforms like this and these talks that we're having is really to tell procurement professionals the power that they have to bring upon positive change, we can bring upon positive change, because they say he who has the money is the Pied Piper, right? He plays the tune. So if you sing the sustainable song, everybody will dance the sustainability dance, and we will work on this shared value. So I think this is the right place to have this discussion, because as they say in Nigeria, procurement professionals have the yam and the knife. Thank you.
And if I can add to that, I think that policy has quite a bit of a role. I think policy has a bit of a role to play here, because we talk about collaborating, and there's no. Can you hear? I very quickly wanted to add that I believe that, I mean, we're talking about collaborating. We're talking about the need to have, it should be in the corporate's best interest to collaborate with SMMEs. But in order to have that be in their best interest, you have two options. The SMMEs need to make a really strong case. And we all know that less than 1% of them will, which means someone else needs to make the case for them. The only person who has the power to do that is the government, is policy saying, we will give you a reason to look to source from SMMEs. We'll give you a reason to give them that voice, to give them that chance. So, and so either we have the government stepping in and giving the corporate a reason to work with SMEs, or we have somebody else stepping in and empowering the SMMEs to make that case for themselves. Both reach the same goals, but one's a lot more efficient and faster, and just a more practical way to get corporates to kind of turn their focus, like Elizabeth was saying, towards these more sustainable options.
Yeah, thank you, Tato. May I jump in and just add a few points? I also think that there is need for capacity building, like the colleagues that have been alluded to earlier on. Some of these guys, they lack competencies in certain areas. So there is need to capacitate them in a way that they know how to handle some business issues. I can tell you for a fact, professional branding is not taught at academic schools and all other colleges. It's some of the things that these guys are lacking. There is need for professional branding.
Okay, so I just want to respond
Go ahead, please,
to Aaron. I mean, it's a very important point, and we often hear this a lot from supply chain specialists. So their problem is that we don't know who these SMMEs are, what they are capable of delivering, what their needs are. At the same time, they are not putting any solution forward around how to solve for that. So how we've decided to solve for that is to make sure that we grade SMMEs. So we have a grading process where we grade SMMEs from blue, bronze, silver, gold, platinum. And to avoid exactly that type of question, that in the pool of SMMEs that we have, yes, some of them might not be exactly where you want them to be, but some have been developed extensively. They are now ready for opportunities. So we can't then apply the same thinking across for all of them, because it's not all of them. We need to differentiate which ones still need support, which ones are ready for opportunities. And that has really been the question from the supply chain teams, that HEPSI help us then to have an automated view and to have workflows that help us to identify which ones are ready, which ones are not ready, how long will it take for the ones that are in the pipeline to be ready. On my side, I say to them, then give us the opportunities so that they can start to see what opportunities are coming up in 6 months' time, and what is required for those opportunities to be ready, so that those who are at gold know exactly that they have 6 months to close the gap. But those that are platinum should be able to have access immediately, because they've proven that they're capable. They've delivered for someone before. But then the tendency is to just say SMMEs aren't ready. And so we've now gone to solve for that, because the ERP systems that exist in corporates don't solve the problems of localization. There's not enough market for them to go and customize for this market. So that's why we've brought in linkage to really close that gap of SMMEs being given opportunities based on their level of readiness. So that then tracks their level of readiness and allows them to say that, okay, if I want to get to gold, I must do this, that. If I want to get to platinum, I must do this, that. Then it puts the onus on them. How much do you want this opportunity? What are you willing to do to get it? So now they're empowered and they know exactly what to do to get to the next level. So someone from procurement must then
Thank you so
go and
much.
source suppliers. Yes.
Thank you so much, Hepsi. There's one more question I just want to take from the chat, and I think I wouldn't be doing this conversation justice if I didn't. Then I know we've went over time, but I'd like to ask one of the panel members to actually take this, but it's regarding the matter of
Can't hear you,
Tato, we can't hear you. Are you able to just point in the chat which one, or just paste it?
Yeah, let me paste it. I just pasted the question in the chat.
No problem. I'll ask it. Regarding the matter of lead time and supply chain between countries on our continent, is the discussion of strengthening infrastructure, rail and road per se, a feasible one? The question refers to creation of bridges in strategic positions with aims to cut down travel. For example, the Sikabo Bridge, which will cut down truck travel by 3 hours from a current route itinerary. This project costs 1.5 billion. However, it will create immense value for the freight forwarding industry. The question, I just need to scroll up, I did see this one as well. The question is, why are we not seeing bigger and larger projects across the continent? Is it because of financing? Could tolling these routes not provide returns on investment? Why aren't large corporations embarking on PPP endeavors? Who from the panel would like to give a commentary on that? Thank you, Godfrey.
Through you, Tato. Well, perhaps this is the time for Botswana to brag in that area, because we remember we have done the same thing. We have built a multi-billion-dollar bridge across Zambia and Botswana, so to try and make logistics easier. That's the same bridge that now instead of taking 10, 20 days to cross into Botswana from DRC and from up Africa, it now takes a few days or a few hours. For me, I think a triple P is a great opportunity. I think many countries, they can learn from what Botswana has done, and then hopefully spread it across Africa. And of course, tolling the roads will also help, recover the funds that were used to build the bridge, and along the bridge as well, and across, the villages in the area. Small MMEs, they sprouted as well because of the bridge. Tourism as well in the area, it went up. So for me, I think Botswana has done a very good start, and I think a lot of countries can, learn from that angle.
Can we just have a last 30-second from each panelist, just as the screen shows from my side, maybe starting with Zipporah. Your final, what would you change comment to this audience? What can they think about actioning within their scope of influence?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to participate today. I think what I would want to see is a combination of what's been said today. I would want to see the understanding that there's talk and there's action, and choosing actionable items that make a difference, such as empowering your supplier, your procurement professionals to scout out the SMMEs, and giving those SMMEs the power and the voice and the understanding to present themselves in a practically relevant manner to those businesses. I as a social business, I have my job of helping them and bringing people to that point. But given the forum where we are now, which is a forum of supply chain professionals, I would want to see the professionals in this context recognizing who's on the other end and trying to take actionable steps towards leveraging the potential of impact that is in their hands.
Thank you, Zipporah. Elizabeth?
Thank you so much. I've had a wonderful time in this discussion. And what I would really like to say is I would really like to buttress on the importance of, collaboration, of cross-sector collaboration. It is really very important that we create ecosystems, and this bears a lot on the government to create an ecosystem where collaboration, is encouraged, facilitated, and sustained. And I still insist, or I still strongly believe that we also need an intermediary. And I think HEPC might be that intermediary, to an extent, but I think we need also the governments to, find an intermediary to create this link between the SMMEs and the corporate and the non-governmental, non-profit organizations, because we're only looking at the strictly business or corporate side. But everybody has to come together, because these are all key stakeholders, These are all key stakeholders. So I believe that this intermediary body, can act as a catalyst, to foster understanding, more cohesion. And I come back and I agree with you, Zipporah. Supply chain professionals, procurement professionals, you have the yam and the knife. You have the power to educate. You have the power to implement change. Please use it. It means a little bit more work, but it's worth it. In my time as a procurement professional, I took a lot of training. You bring bids. People are only interested to bring offers where they say, oh, it costs this. But you have to educate them. Do they understand the terms of the bid? Do they understand what is required? Do they know what safety is? Do they know that safety has a cost? Do they know that sustainability has a cost? And it's all there in your bid, but you have to put it down in a language that they understand. You have to put all your legalese in your terms of reference, but you need to break it down so people can really understand what it entails to see if they are ready. And I think HEPC's linkage is already making people aware of what is required of them. Nobody is asking anybody to compromise on quality. Everybody deserves the best, but we have to raise everybody up at the same time, because like I said, a good business operates in a thriving community. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Aaron, it's you have the sword apparently, or the knife, to make it happen. What's your closing remark?
Thank you very much, Deb. I think the key takeaways is sustainability and value for money is not only for the procurement professionals alone, it's the duty for everyone. There is need for communities and the procurement professionals and the government as well to work together. There is no need to work in silos if you need to achieve a certain goal, a certain objective. So I would like to implore on procurement professionals to ensure that they get the requisite skills that is needed, especially when you are managing a large contracts. Managing and monitoring of large contracts, I'm sure you will also agree with me that it requires a lot of collaboration. So collaboration is very important in supply chain. I think that will be my closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaron. Godfrey?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. This has been a great session. I'll say I think we also need, to start demanding accountability. For over the years, I've seen, the government, throwing money into the development of SMMEs. SMMEs, they eat the money, they don't do anything, and then life go on. I think we need to be deliberate going forward. We need to get everybody to be accountable, and then going forward, then everybody should stand up. And at the same time, I think we should also do the best we can to collaborate with the private institutions. They seem to be doing very well in that area. Let's try to separate SME development, and opportunities with politics as well. Because once politics come in, it changes the game altogether. That's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you. And to link it all together from our lady from One Linkage, Pixie?
I think maybe my remarks are around a case study that maybe I'd like to share just a little bit of, where a corporate has just been very deliberate in how they bring in SMMEs closer to their operations. And I think what they've understood is transparency. How do SMMEs get opportunities? And their answer was, we are going to be transparent in terms of what we're looking for, how you prepare for it, how we'll enable you to prepare for it. So they've then implemented the system to do so. So they have a good view of the landscape, the pipeline, and have a deliberate system that is dedicated for SMMEs only, so that they can track and monitor their efforts vis-a-vis what they do for other corporates and set aside opportunities specifically for those SMMEs. I think for me, that case study, particularly because I'm quite involved in it with Sasol, they've done incredible work in ensuring that they carve a niche for small businesses and have a system that really looks at their needs and then collaborate in solving those problems. So I think that case study can really trickle down into other areas. That's my passing words here.